Good afternoon, welcome to my channel Auntie Avon. I'm Karen. This week in my Finding 50 series I am on episode 3, part 2. So last week in part 1 I told the story of how I met my future husband who displayed narcissistic traits, qualities, whatever you want to call it. And the lead up to when he went to university. Now I know I missed off the end because I'm just rubbish at all this technology stuff, as I keep telling you. So I missed that off. So what I've done is I have attached it here. So you can watch that part first. I think it might only be about 8 minutes maybe. So I'll let you watch that first and then I will be back straight after that. Okay, so enjoy the parts you missed. So that is what I did. But I think this is when I started to get into a little bit of a situation with money, started to have a few debts. I think I took out a couple of loans because I was trying to help him and buying books and things like that for him, and these books that he needed were really expensive, but he said, I don't want to ask my mum and dad because they won't help me, you know, they didn't want me to go back to uni in the first place, but I need all this, otherwise I can't study. And he would say things that would make me feel guilty if I didn't help him, and I felt I didn't really have a choice. So as the stress from him and trying to deal with his moods and his needs started to rub off, and I think with the stresses at work as well, or the atmosphere there, I think like my calm outer shell just fell off, and I think I was exposed and I felt vulnerable and I felt a lot more upset than I should have done. So as the year drew to a close and 1992 appeared, his workload was increasing from uni and I was going on different courses to gain new skills, and it was great, you know, things were kind of getting better. So whilst work was getting better, our relationship wasn't really, and as the nitpicking continued, we were about to go on a nice trip away to see our friends in Kent, and this is when the nitpicking really took a turn and had a massive effect on me, and one that was to be quite long lasting. I am going to stop there. I know that most of you, if you're watching this, will be like, oh no, I want to know what happens. But I'm going to save that for next week. So that will be in episode 3, part 2. And I will continue the story whilst including this and how his nitpicking and the stress of being in a relationship with somebody that is constantly demanding and taking from you, and what effect that had on me. I'm Karen. Bye. Okay, welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed that and it made a little bit more sense. Honestly, rubbish. I need to learn to stop rushing and trying to get it uploaded on time. I just don't want to sort of let people down. Okay, so last week we got up to 1991. Pete had started uni and I'd started my new job. Things had been going quite well on that front, but personally they were about to take a life-changing shift. This is going to be the first time that I've really spoken about it, because I spent most of my early 20s, mid-20s, and from then on pretty much keeping it not a secret as such, but not really telling people, and I was kind of getting good at covering it up. But in today's episode, I'm going to be brave and I'm going to tell you how his nitpicking and the constant demands of just being in a relationship with somebody who has narcissistic tendencies, just how much that affected me. I'm sure that if you have suffered at the hand of a narcissist or been in a narcissistic relationship, then you will have your own story to tell, but this is how it affected me. I am going to read from my notes today because there is so much, and if I don't read from my notes, I will forget. Okay, it was 1992 and I was almost 22 when it first struck, and boy did it show its ugly face in the worst possible situation. I was driving Pete's car. He was in the passenger seat. We were coming back home from Kent after a relatively nice but stressful weekend seeing friends. We were going along nicely, but Pete was picking in his usual fashion, and I think the stress of his behaviour throughout the entire weekend, and now the constant comments and complaining about my driving, had finally pushed me over the edge. So there we were, on one of the major motorways in the outside lane, when suddenly I had an overwhelming compulsion to stop. Yes, I did say stop, and outside lane of a major motorway. Why? I couldn't to this day explain, other than to say I was compelled to do so. By fear? I think so. Of what? I don't know. I was always the calm, happy one, making light out of every dark situation. But what I hadn't realised is that over the course of our 3-year relationship, the controlling and nitpicking were having an impact, and this was no more apparent than in the car. Every time I got into the driver's seat, he would start. I said in part 1 about his comments about the heating being too hot or then being too cold. You know, wind down the window, do it up, change gear, indicate, watch that car, where have you got your driving licence from? And it was little comments like that. Now at first, I think I just used to laugh it off, but I think when it was every single time, and because obviously of his epilepsy, he didn't really like to drive, and also he was of the opinion, I guess, why should I have to drive if I can get someone else to do it for me? Another thing that he used to do every single journey, a long journey, was needing the toilet. It was like having a child in the car, literally. We'd no sooner be on the road than he'd be like, I need the toilet. And I would say, but, you know, we've only just started, can't you wait? It's like only up the road, or, you know. And it wasn't just that he would say, I want the toilet, can we stop? It was the behaviour around it. He'd be holding his groin area and going, I need the toilet, I need the toilet, you need to stop, come on, pull over, come on, just, I need the toilet. And I can see his face now saying it. It makes me laugh now. Because obviously I'm not in that situation anymore, but at the time, with everything else, and the whole situation of him being at uni and everything else, I think it was grinding on me. And I think you'd have to be an absolute saint not to let it affect you in some way. All this built up tension and negativity had clearly reached boiling point. Instead of just walking away from him or questioning him, by the way, I did actually do both of these options later on in the marriage, but they just weren't successful, because it's kind of like arguing with a 3-year-old. Had exploded into that one single moment in the car. That one solitary dot on my lifeline changed me forever. My love and enjoyment of driving turned to fear, panic and anxiety, and it still haunts me today, 28 years later. So there I was in the outside lane of the motorway, and I was stationary. When I wrote this, I actually realised how scary that scenario is, or was. So I guess, you know, we are both lucky to be alive. And we were lucky that there weren't actually a lot of cars around. It was a Sunday, I think. So, you know, if it had been now, Sundays like are major busy, aren't they? So I don't think we would have stood a chance, really. I felt terror. I was dizzy. My head felt fuzzy and my heart was about ready to burst out of my chest and run off down the motorway screaming for air. My boyfriend was yelling at me to drive. I tried and managed about 20 yards, but I felt utter panic and I pressed the brake and stopped yet again, still in the outside lane. I looked over at him in the vain hope of some comforting words, but he was mouthing something at me and his face looked all screwed up like he'd been chewing a wasp. I couldn't hear his voice as the sound of my pounding heartbeat thumped loudly through my ears and vibrated my head. I could feel tears streaming down my face as I recall him dragging me, and I do mean dragging, out of the driver's seat and into the passenger side. He immediately went from 0 to 60 in a nanosecond, all the time yelling at me, never ceasing to let me know what a stupid piece of useless bitch I was. Yeah, I heard that. Now I realise it was a frightening situation and anybody would have been freaking out, but any human being could have seen that I was suffering and not in my right mind. The irony is that it was his behaviour that had caused mine. That was a very, very long journey home. I said nothing. I felt shame, sadness and confusion. The whole journey back, even though I said nothing, he kept going. His insults were incessant. He just never let it go. His lack of compassion and understanding, I guess, just added to that situation and made it feel probably a billion times worse. A few months passed and the incident faded into the background. I genuinely thought I was okay. One Saturday morning, I was driving alone up the motorway and there had been a few roadworks going on. As I continued driving, singing to some 90s tunage, I noticed that the hard shoulder had been closed off for normal traffic. Normally, this would not have been a problem. However, this was not normal and I was not in a good place. So as I approached the cones, there was a blanket of doom slowly being pulled up towards my head, heavier with every tug. How would I stop? Where would I stop? Ridiculous, right? However, it's how I felt, and right at that point, I wanted to escape. I felt scared, tearful and fearful of death. What the hell was this? Why was it happening to me again? The more cones I saw, the worse it became, until the tears started and I desperately looked around trying to get other drivers' attention. God knows why, but that's what it felt like. I was hot yet shivering and I felt breathless and very alone. My heart was trying to escape again and I was fully convinced it was actually going to. I couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe. The cones were relentless, taunting me with their pointy little tips. There was nowhere for me to go as the 3 lanes filled with oblivious drivers carelessly going about their journeys. The 10 to 15 minute drive was now feeling more like 2 hours of hell. In the back of my mind I knew this was not a rational response, but my state of panicked mind was clearly stronger and very persistent in showing me who was in control. As I reluctantly drove forward, constantly wanting to slam on my brake, a miracle appeared in the form of a junction. Do I take it and get off this nightmare? Do I stay on here with the evil cones and trapped in my own private nightmare? Before I'd had a chance to think about it, I had indicated and was heading off the motorway and towards the roundabout. I drove almost on autopilot and stopped in a side road. I don't even remember getting there, but somehow I did. There, I sobbed and sobbed. I don't even remember how long I had been there, but I knew I had to make the journey home, and the very thought of that tensed up my stomach and overwhelmed me with anxiety, and the tears came again. I could call someone. No, I was too embarrassed. How could I tell someone that I was stuck just off the M4, sobbing my eyes out because there were too many cones on the road? That's what I was dealing with. I tried to rationalise it, but I couldn't. I was scared. Scared of death, scared of not being in control. Somehow I managed to get home, but I really can't remember how or what time it was. I know that I cried a lot that day, but I kept it secret. Over the next few months, now that it had happened twice, I was starting to get scared of going in the car. I hated myself, but I had to get to work, so I had no choice. And I did get in the car, and I think because Pete and I weren't going away so often at that time, you know, with him being at uni and lack of money, etc., I think that it kind of stopped for a bit. Then, one day, I was out shopping with one of my friends. We were in the big shopping precinct local to us. We decided to take the lift to the top floor to get some food. As we got nearer to the lift, I felt a familiar but unwelcome feeling grip my soul. Fear, maybe? More like doom, I would say. I tried to shake it off. Then the lift door opened. I couldn't move. The lift was rammed and my heart rate shot through the roof. I looked terrified. I know this, as my friend gently held my arm. "We can take the stairs," she said knowingly. The fear dissipated and I was left feeling upset and wanting to cry. We said nothing more about it and enjoyed our shopping trip. In May or June of '92, Pete was struggling with his workload and commuting, so he had decided for his final year that he would move to London to be closer to the uni. He and two friends of his from the course were going to rent together. I wasn't too sure how I felt about it, but figured it wasn't going to affect us that much anyway. So in August, I think, he moved and I helped him. I gave him money to get started with rent, books and food, etc. He had a place in Clapham, so as he went through the door it had stairs going up and the whole flat was on that floor, and there were 3 big rooms. I don't know if there was a lounge or not. I can't remember there being a lounge. I think it was just there. They all had really big bedrooms, and then you had the kitchen and this tiny bathroom. So I went to visit him and it was good because finally we were having some time together. But every time I stayed I ended up buying a takeaway and then staying over, which then involved buying drinks, etc. And it was a great location as all the shops, bars and restaurants were on his doorstep, but it was expensive because everything was so accessible. On the way home the next day I got lost, but didn't have any of those awful, fearful moments. I just got on with it. Finally, it had left me. 1993 arrived and Pete became more stressed unless he was with his uni mates and off his face. One of the weekends I went, I met Jessie, the only girl on the course. She was nice enough, but a little condescending at times, and the more I went there, the more I felt like I was thick and didn't belong in that world. I was supposed to stay over one weekend, but the two of them sat at the computer chatting and laughing over private jokes. I felt like an outcast, and I felt awful. I sat on his bed wondering why I'd even bothered going. I paid for his food, drinks, rent, and then the one time I actually get to see him, he's there with another girl, flirting, and it was flirting. I wasn't imagining it. I'd seen his flirting, remember? I got up and left. I never said anything, but as I got to the bottom of the stairs, he came out of his room, leant over the banister and asked where I was going. I told him home. He got stroppy and made some shitty remark about me being difficult and being a stupid girl. I had to agree with him about the stupid girl part, so I drove home with tears streaming down my face. Another girl was on a different course, but he made friends with her as well. None of the other guys were bothered, but Pete, being Pete, couldn't miss an opportunity to charm another woman. So they were always laughing and joking and having a few drinks. They would be going out after uni, like to the student bar, and he seemed to delight in telling me about these things. of course, you know, I didn't really know what to think. I wasn't very happy, obviously. One weekend during my visit, Pete and I were talking, just having a nice time, and I don't even know how we got onto it, but he told me that she had spent the night there, in his bedroom, in his bed. I was so upset. In his bed? He told me I was being stupid again for thinking that he was doing anything. She had had a bad period, so he was comforting her. Rubbing her stomach and giving her a hot water bottle. Yeah, I know. The hardest part about our relationship was if I ever confronted him about his unreasonable behaviour, he would turn it around into such a way as to make me actually feel like the wrongdoer. Or what he was doing was acceptable and I was being unreasonable. It was definitely an amazing talent of his. So I flipped, told him I'd had enough of this, we were over, and I left again, driving home with tears in my eyes. Just reminded me of that Ultravox song, Dancing with Tears in My Eyes. Driving with tears in my eyes. I remember my mum or dad saying to me that he had phoned me several times, like on the house phone, trying to get hold of me, but I didn't go straight home, apart from to sneak out a bottle of whiskey, sorry Dad, and instead I went next door to my old childhood boyfriend and burst into tears. He was very upset at seeing me so upset and took me in. He sat me in his room and we talked everything out. That year he'd lost his mum as well, and she was a really good friend of my mum's, and you know, we loved her. So we ended up talking about her as well, and it was great. He got everything off his chest, I got everything off my chest, and we just kind of got drunk. It just got it all out, and it was brilliant. It was really nice having someone to talk to, and I ended up forgetting about my shitty day with Pete. Over the next few days, Pete and I talked things through, and unbelievably, I actually felt guilty for thinking such things of my perfect, honest boyfriend. He twisted and turned the truth, and because he was a master of manipulation, I felt that I was totally stupid for running off like that, and that it really was nothing to be concerned about. It turned out that he was telling the truth. A couple of other people had sort of mentioned it, but I still felt like nobody actually saw my side, and that I was actually being ridiculous and stupid. And that still bugs me a little bit today, because I don't think I overreacted. Maybe I should have taken a bloke home and said, oh, that's all right, I spent the night with my neighbour. You know, maybe that's what I should have done. And then told him. And, you know, said, oh, but don't worry about it. You know, he was just rubbing my stomach. Yeah. Crazy now when I think about it. Another weekend I stopped over and he had been talking to another ex-girlfriend of his. They were going to meet up on the Monday morning as she was in town. He took great delight in telling me how he loved her years ago, but she was too ambitious for his liking. Now this actually says quite a lot about a narcissist, because at the time I didn't think anything of it. I was just quite glad that he didn't think of her the same way now that he used to. But now when I think about it, of course he's not going to like somebody who's more ambitious than him. He would hate that. Makes a lot of sense. I spent the whole weekend worrying about meeting her because of how he described her. Blonde, tall, extremely clever, degree qualified, ambitious, which is what he had liked about her in the first place, but ended up splitting them up. See, you never quite know where you are with a narcissist. Knowing that I wasn't as ambitious as her, and my much-loved job was paling into insignificance, I remember feeling anxious about meeting yet another of his ex-girlfriends. I had taken a really nice outfit with me to wear as I would be going straight to work on the Monday from Clapham. So I got up extra early and made sure I looked my absolute best. In my early 20s it wasn't too difficult. No jowls or droopy eyes then. I wore tight black trousers, gorgeous heels, a black silk top and a fitted black jacket with a gorgeous pink trim sort of down here and a big gold button. I remember it. I love that jacket. I don't think I'd even get my wrist in there now. I looked great. Makeup, tick. Hair, huge and perfect. So she walks in and my anxiety leapt out of me and ran off down the road. I said my hellos and goodbyes to her. She was scruffy, wide-eyed, dressed in baggy black clothes and a satchel-type bag thrown across her back. My, Peter, you loved her? I thought to myself, really? She was actually really nice, and as I left for work, I had no worries whatsoever about leaving the two of them to their day of catch-ups over lunch. And he delighted in calling me later, telling me how much she loved me, saying how beautiful I was and that he had done very well for himself. Of course, he loved that. As the year progressed and our relationship somehow limped its way to his graduation, I started to feel happier at the thought of his course ending and the possibility of us moving in together. Although God knows why I wanted that, thinking back to how he treated me. But love and youth. He came out of uni with the degree that he wanted. I came out with debt and a sense of loss. He wasn't the same Pete that had started his degree journey 3 years previous. He now had a sense of magnified arrogance and confidence to his already self-entitled ego. If I thought he was cruel and manipulative before, I hadn't seen anything yet. Okay, I'm going to stop there for this week, and what I thought I'd do now is kind of go through some of the traits that a narcissist can display. I have put up on the screen now about narcissistic personality disorder, and as you can see, they have an inflated sense of self-importance, which is probably one of the biggest traits, I would say, and only their opinion matters. Nobody else matters to them. It's all about them, me, myself and I think. The other one would be the lack of empathy for others, and he definitely displayed that towards me and probably pretty much most people around him, actually. I was sort of thinking about it earlier today, and the way he treated some of his friends. I think that's why he didn't really keep a lot of friends. And as you can see also on the screen, it says that some people might not enjoy being around them. And I think that's why they do end up kind of lonely. Apparently, to have this kind of disorder, I'm not a doctor or medically trained or anything like that. This is just what I've read. Okay. You have to have 5 out of the 9 traits, and they have to be present by early adulthood and across like many different aspects of their life, like relationships, schools, work. So let's have a look at some of the traits. Number 1, a grandiose sense of self-importance. Preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. I think maybe that's why, in his case, he had so many women, because I think he was searching for something. And then even when he said that he found it with me, he still was paying loads of attention to other women. So I don't think that part of him was ever satisfied in any way, and I don't think anyone could ever do it, because nobody can live up to it. A belief that one is special and can only be understood by or associate with other special people or institutions. Now this one I think sums up the situation that I said earlier, when he was with Jessie, sat at the computer talking to her, and they're having their own like little private club, and nobody was allowed in. And I certainly felt that. I felt like a big outsider, probably through most of his uni, especially the last year. See, now, in my mature years, I wouldn't give a toss, really. it wouldn't bother me because I've got other things and I feel more confident with myself in that way. So I wouldn't feel intimidated by it, but I think I did back then. But I might be saying that because I'm no longer in that sort of relationship, so I don't know. A need for excessive admiration, definitely for him, from women. That's what he wanted, and from his peers. I think he was constantly sort of reminding people how good he was. And actually, this will come into play in like the next couple of episodes of this, or couple of parts of this episode, because I think it became more apparent later as we had children and the situations that we were in, like parents' evening and things like that. There were a couple of good ones in there, so I shall definitely be going into that. A sense of entitlement to special treatment. Yeah, definitely. Yes. Like I said in the beginning, you need to take me to the pub, you need to pick me up. Always about him. Ooh. Exploitation of others. Absolutely. Yeah. In many ways, I think. I saw this more so, I think, with his friends, but obviously he exploited me and my good nature. He took money from me. He never actually felt guilty from it because he thought he was entitled to that. A lack of empathy, yes. He never displayed any empathy to me, I would say, pretty much throughout the whole time that I knew him. And from what I've heard about his subsequent relationships, I think they kind of went the same way. Envy of others, or the belief that one is the object of envy. I'm not sure. Possibly. Not as much as the others though, I think. Arrogant, haughty behaviour or attitudes. Definitely arrogant. 150 billion% arrogant. Yes, there's no doubt that he displays at least 5 of those. It's quite interesting to see it listed like that. If not a little scary how accurate it is. So I've been trying to do this in little sections just because it's easier, I think, to not just to listen to, but for me to tell it, because there were kind of different sections, you know, how we met, and then him, like the uni years and what happened there, and my panic attacks and how all that began. And then like once he left uni and then we moved in together, there was that period of time. Then we had children, and I think it escalated probably to a new level once we got children. But I think that kind of makes sense with the narcissist, because they like to be the important ones, and then suddenly somebody else has come along and taken that role from them, and they don't like that, regardless of the fact it's a child. So I hope that you will join me next week for part 3, and if you like this one, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe, because it would be really great to have you like on this journey with me, and also the support is very important and it means such a lot to me. So please hit that subscribe button. I will be back on Friday with Auntie Avon, and I hope that you have enjoyed last Friday's Avon video and what's in the new campaign. Please make sure that you go by my Facebook page as well and have a look and look at the brochure on there, and happy shopping. So until next time, I'm Karen. Bye.